Hello, I am Marco Davis, President and CEO of the Congressional Hispanic Caucus Institute. Welcome back to Day 3 of our 2021 Leadership Conference. I'm so glad you have joined us virtually as we celebrate Hispanic Heritage Month. Presente, Latinos Leading the Way is the theme of our annual conference and awards gala this year. The speakers, presenters, moderators, and special guests reflect the sentiment of our theme in so many ways and are a reminder to assert ourselves in our power, to create positive change in our communities, and to serve as examples for others throughout the nation. Remember to be right back here with us on Thursday for our 44th Annual Awards Gala, also on this virtual platform. Our stellar lineup of special guests includes Chef Jose Andres, House Speaker Nancy Pelosi, Eva Longoria, and others. And of course, our Medallion of Excellence honorees, actress, director, and producer America Ferrera, and civil rights activist Sylvia Mendez. Multi-talented journalist, author, and entrepreneur Mariana Atencio will be our MC for the night, and we'll even have a special message from the President of the United States, Joe Biden. We'll finish the evening with a great musical performance. You won't want to miss it. And invite your friends. Thank you to all the speakers from yesterday's sessions who talked about a broad range of topics, including environmental justice, identity, and fintech. Your time and preparation to be a part of our conference is greatly appreciated. If you weren't able to join us or catch all the sessions you wanted to watch, links to the video recordings of our plenaries and breakouts are posted here on the website for you to watch on demand. And be sure to check the agenda for any updates to the schedule. As you can imagine, in this virtual world, we occasionally need to shift things around. Today, we have another amazing lineup of sessions, speakers, and activities, beginning with a plenary on what's needed for equitable economic recovery, followed by our daily Cafecito networking break, and then a real diversity of sessions on important topics including foreign affairs, technology infrastructure, Puerto Rico, immigrants in the workforce, and even cryptocurrency. Remember that our virtual career fair will take place next week on Tuesday, September 28th. Watch for more details about it throughout the conference. By the way, if you weren't aware, CHCI has a podcast. It's named Here to Lead, and it features in-depth, insightful conversations with extraordinary Latino and Latina leaders. It's available on all the major platforms wherever you get your podcasts. And once you listen, give us a review and let us know what you think. For now, though, continue to follow us on social media with the hashtag CHCIHHM21. And please continue to tell your colleagues and friends they can still register for free to attend the rest of our conference and watch the last 2 days of sessions by going to chci.org. We hope you have a great day, and we'll see you back here soon.
Welcome to the CHCI Leadership Conference Plenary Session, Equitable Economic Recovery in a Post-Pandemic Future. We are grateful for the support of our sponsors, AARP, Airbnb, JP Morgan Chase & Company. Our panel chair for today's session is Senator Catherine Cortez Masto of Nevada. She made history by becoming the first woman from Nevada and the first Latina ever elected to the United States Senate. Senator Cortez Masto sits on the Committee on Finance, the Committee on Banking, Housing and Urban Affairs, the Committee on Energy and Natural Resources, and the Committee on Indian Affairs. This panel will feature a special interview with Isabella Casillas Guzman, Administrator of the U.S. Small Business Administration. Our moderator for today's session is Omar Jimenez, a CNN correspondent based in Chicago. Since starting as a correspondent in 2019, Mr. Jimenez has helped lead CNN's coverage on numerous national and international stories. Please welcome our opening speaker, Senator Catherine Cortez Masto.
Hi, I'm Senator Catherine Cortez Masto, and I'm so glad to join you today. Like many of you, my focus right now is on making sure our community can recover economically from the COVID-19 pandemic and creating good paying jobs. We know that job losses from the pandemic are disproportionately affecting Latinos and immigrant communities in general. And we've got to work together to get our community the support it needs to get through this. Now, I'd like to take a moment to thank Isabella Guzman the SBA administrator, for contributing to this important conversation and for all of her work to help small businesses across the country. I'd like to take a moment to thank Isabella Guzman, the SBA administrator, for contributing to this important conversation and for all of her work to help small businesses across the country. Now, back home in Nevada, I have focused on getting our Latino community equal access to vaccines and to economic support during this pandemic. That's why I worked so hard to pass the American Rescue Plan and get working families money in their pockets, a monthly tax cut, and critical rental assistance. But we know the key to getting through this will be new jobs. That's been my top priority. With the bipartisan infrastructure bill the Senate passed in August, we'll be able to strengthen and diversify our economy and bring more good-paying jobs to Nevada and communities across the nation. We're going to be rebuilding roads, bridges, and transit systems, investing in our schools, and yes, expanding access to broadband. I also think we have a real opportunity to cut taxes for middle-class Americans and pass comprehensive immigration reform in the upcoming reconciliation package. And I'll continue to fight for those priorities in the Senate. As the first and only Latina in the U.S. Senate, I am committed to making sure all of our communities have a voice at the table and can thrive. Thank you for this important conversation and for your partnership in supporting Latinos.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Omar Jimenez, and I'm a correspondent with CNN. I am so happy to be here as part of the Congressional Hispanic Caucus Institute's Leadership Conference during Hispanic Heritage Month. We've got a great program ahead. Before we begin, I want to thank Senator Catherine Cortez Masto for her opening remarks on this important issue. We're going to kick off today's discussion with a special interview that I'm very excited about, with Isabella Casillas Guzman, the administrator of the U.S. Small Business Administration. Administrator Guzman is a fierce advocate for financial relief for small businesses and focuses on expanding assistance to entrepreneurs in underserved communities. She grew up in a small business family and has been an entrepreneur herself. She spent her entire career advising entrepreneurs, launching ventures, helping small businesses navigate government, and creating policies and programs to help advance entrepreneurship and innovation. Please welcome the 27th Administrator of the U.S. Small Business Administration, Isabella Casillas Guzman. I want to begin with what the Small Business Administration actually does. It's been the backbone of support for small businesses since it was started in 1953. Give us some background on what services and support the SBA provides, specifically when talking about underserved entrepreneurs, women, people of color, veterans, low income. And then how did growing up as a daughter of a small business owner shape, I'm sure, the very work that you're doing right now?
Well, thank you for that question. I think what's amazing is that probably pre-pandemic, even more so, SBA was often referred to as a little agency, unknown, but the best kept secret. And I think in reality, the SBA delivers such strong programs and initiatives to support our small businesses, access to capital, access to marketplaces, so how businesses can navigate the federal government or get into global markets, access to networks. And we know how important it is to build a team of support around you, and those networks are really critical. So the SBA has lending programs on the capital front, as well as investment programs and grants available to our small businesses. In addition, we have technical assistance and services to help our businesses access the largest buyer in the world, the federal government, through government contracting. And we do all this through an incredible network of resource partners on the ground throughout the states and territories. And those are our small business development centers, our SCORE chapters, our women's business centers, and our veterans business opportunity centers, as well as our incredible field offices. SBA.gov has incredible content for small businesses to help them navigate federal resources and just learn more about strategies, cutting edge strategies on how to operate their business, how to expand into new markets, how to access capital to take advantage of those opportunities to expand, and in just getting inspiration in addition to keep on going. And we know our entrepreneurs have incredible grit and determination, and oftentimes they wear so many hats to run their businesses, starting out small most likely and then growing with larger teams. But we know that they need that support and technical assistance to give them expertise across all the areas of their business that they have to manage. And I think it was formative for me to grow up in a small business. My father's a veterinarian and opened a chain of veterinary hospitals when I was 1. He opened his very first one in East Los Angeles, and I grew up working with him in the veterinary hospital and learning how much hard work it takes to run a business, and not only that, how integral they become and as in the community and as part of the community. And every person who walks through that small business's doors is just such a key part of that business's ability to build wealth for themselves and their families and their workforce and their communities. And so I loved that interaction with businesses and the communities and the big role that they play along our main streets, along our innovation hubs, and in our business and industrial centers. I think that one of the other things that was really valuable is how much they give back to community. I recall going with my father to vaccination clinics and helping, with the free spays and neuters for the pets. And so it was really impressive to see how much businesses give back. And we don't even realize that impact until we pay attention. And during COVID, I think more than ever, the SBA has played that role of really trying to step in and support our small businesses through this time. And the SBA is no longer that little unknown agency I referenced. It's definitely known through the Paycheck Protection Program and the COVID Economic Injury Disaster Loan programs that have been vital to survival during this time. And so now we've scaled from a $40 billion output portfolio per year to over $1 trillion in relief during COVID. So the transformation's been remarkable, and I'm so proud to lead this agency during this time.
Well, and better than most, the grit, determination, the persistence it takes to be a successful entrepreneur, because it is a tough endeavor. But this past year and a half maybe has been the toughest time we've ever seen through the COVID-19 public health crisis. That's translated to an economic crisis, especially for small businesses, minority-owned businesses in communities across the country. So now, as you remain hopeful, as many entrepreneurs are, how do we ensure a good economic recovery? How are you helping ensure small businesses maintain a good economic recovery in the long term? And are there any economic forecasts that are sort of guiding your decision making in trying to make sure they are coming back on the best foot possible?
Yeah, I think that what's really critical is that we continue to support our small businesses during this time, because with the Delta variant, many of them are still struggling in this economy, and there have been disproportionate impacts we've seen during the pandemic, and really speaks to the Biden-Harris administration's commitment to take action and fight COVID. Of course, we've seen incredible economic performance. Since the president's taken office, the 4 million jobs that have been created, record economic activity and support that we've seen across our small businesses during that whole time. I think that right now, as we're focused on continuing to get billions of dollars of relief out, we have over $150 billion available within our COVID Economic Injury Disaster Loan Program, which is low cost, long-term, very affordable patient capital for our small businesses to access with deferment on their payments and interest, so that they can continue to stay afloat during this time. Because as the president said last week, he's committed to making sure our schools and our economy can stay open by fighting COVID with more vaccinations. I know that our underserved businesses have had disproportionate impact, as their communities have been disproportionately impacted as well. And we saw them struggling to access relief during COVID, as well as facing some of those historic barriers and lack of access to capital that have inhibited their ability to really pivot and adapt as well as they could have. So we're really pleased that in 2021, our focused attention on getting a service to the smallest of the small businesses, underserved communities across the country, to make sure that they had the relief that they needed. PPP in 2021, 96% of it went to small businesses with 20 and under employees, and we were really proud to focus on that outreach and networking in communities to better connect the SBA. And we're proud to be launching shortly the Community Navigator pilot program, which was part of the American Rescue Plan, and an effort to better connect businesses to resources so that we wouldn't repeat some of the challenges previously in previous COVID relief, so that we could have our local trusted networks on the ground ready to connect our small businesses to all of SBA services. President Biden recently emphasized the importance of additional relief for our small businesses and his commitment to continue to support our businesses during this time. And we announced an increase in our COVID EIDL program from a $500,000 cap to $2 million, as we know businesses have had to sustain a much longer period of economic injury. We've made that program as flexible as possible and continue to prioritize the smallest businesses with a priority period now for those businesses accessing under 500,000 through October 8th. So we're excited that we still have relief. We still have incredible support networks, which we're working on expanding and throughout the states and territories, thanks to the great support of the American Rescue Plan and the planned activities, as well into the future with the President's Build Back Better agenda.
Well, and one of the unique challenges that I think you have is we're in a period where I think you, like many of us, had hope that we would have been past this 6 months after it began in summer of 2020. There was that hope. And then there was a moment where it was like, okay, we are actually going to be in this for a long time, for the foreseeable future. And I think the way that translates to you is the question, at least, that comes to mind for that is, how is helping in a long-term disaster of sorts, like a pandemic, different than maybe responding to an acute event where the timeline for recovery might be a little more predictable?
And SBA is always there during disasters. We have our Office of Disaster Assistance that steps in alongside FEMA and offers physical as well as economic injury disaster loans to small businesses and individuals affected by natural disasters. And in the case of COVID and some of these large natural disasters we've seen, there is a continued need for recovery months and potentially years into the future. And that's why these programs that we're establishing that are helping these highly impacted businesses get back on track, as well as helping these smallest entities really connect to resources like through the Community Navigator program. I think we can better position our ecosystems and the support that we have available to offer them so that we can meet businesses where they are, understanding their financial situation, understanding how they've had to change their operations to adapt to the disaster that happens to be impacting them, or in this case, the COVID pandemic and its lasting effects on the economy. So we're hopeful with what we're seeing in terms of our ability to support these businesses during this time. And the SBA has rallied support of an incredible network of lenders. We've gone from over 1,000 to over 5,000 since COVID. And so we continue to build our networks and try to better support our small businesses on the ground.
And obviously, COVID-19 is not going anywhere, at least in the foreseeable future. That's why people should get vaccinated. But one of the things that I think about within the context of what you do is, I think the way we looked at COVID when it first came versus where it is now is almost completely different. And you told me a little bit about what small businesses should expect in the foreseeable future with some of the new programs coming in. But I'm curious, how do you think doing your job now is different than it would have been in, say, March or April 2020? I know you weren't in that administration and you just came in this one, but are there any key differences for how you think small businesses are perceiving their situations from a year ago to now? And again, are there differences in sort of the strategy that you're helping with in regards to businesses looking ahead?
Mm-hmm. Having served as California's lead on small businesses and innovative startups, prior to this, I witnessed firsthand the challenges that businesses had immediately, back in that March 2020 timeframe. And so, what's different now is obviously they've had to pivot and adapt. They've been able to institute processes in their operations to keep their workers safe and to keep their customers safe. And importantly, they've also adopted technology at really high rates. which has positioned them in many cases to continue to build revenues through e-commerce, and which also opens them up to markets beyond their own communities. And so, I think that the businesses themselves are in a very different situation financially as well. Though they've also taken on more debt in order to survive during this time, and remain optimistic and continue to make investments in their business. And so as we view the role now at the SBA, we really need to understand our customers, how they've been impacted. And of course, it's our focus at the SBA to serve especially our underserved businesses, women, people of color, veterans, rural communities and low-income communities who we know have had historic barriers and disparate impacts from COVID. And so I think what's different is really how the businesses are coming to the table, and thus how we have to transform our products to really serve them and meet them where they are, as I say. And I really think that's critical because accessing capital needs to be more flexible, and that's what we're focused on trying to do within the Biden-Harris administration and the Build Back Better agenda. Our networks need to be strengthened and more authentic to communities that need these resources in order for us all to succeed. And I think that now more than ever, we're increasingly focused on making sure that equity is top of mind, because we need all of our entrepreneurs, as the president says, with ideas from everywhere and anywhere, to be able to succeed and find that path forward for their business. They put so much out there on the line in terms of risking when they start, and we want to make sure that they grow and connect to the capital to support them.
And the last thing I want to ask you is, say I'm a small business owner. A lot of times you can feel separate from what's going on in Washington, D.C., and you feel like your focus is putting food on the table for your family. While in D.C., they're working on high-level policy. Specifically, I'm talking about the infrastructure bill, things like the reconciliation process that is all in the works right now. But specifically in the infrastructure bill, are there provisions, at least in the current version of it, that will affect the Small Business Administration and, more importantly, small businesses?
Yes, and I think there's some exciting opportunities for small businesses. Within the bipartisan infrastructure deal, there's going to be such key investments in our infrastructure, and that helps businesses. Those multi-year investments in roads and bridges and transit systems, high-speed internet. We talked about their increasing adoption of technology, that modern, resilient electric grid. All those things will really help small businesses by breaking those bottlenecks in our economy. Goods will get to customers more rapidly, and that's important for small businesses who depend on those systems. In addition, the innovation. Of course, our small businesses are innovators, and in terms of advancing climate resilience, I think they have a huge role to play. And then more broadly, in the Build Back Better agenda and the reconciliation bill that's going through Congress now, small businesses are at the forefront of what we look at when we're reimagining our economy. We know that they lead on job creation, and they're such critical parts of our economic output. So there will be investments targeted at small businesses over the next 10 years within that package. And currently a $25 billion target. And that's going to focus on small business lending. I talked about increased needs to be flexible and fill some of those market gaps, so our businesses can take advantage of opportunities to grow. Investments and innovation will empower small businesses and the SBA to better help them, especially underserved businesses, expand all of our core programs with equity and give them access to markets and networks that can help position them for success in government contracting, innovation, or anything that they put their minds to.
Well, that's our time. Thank you, Administrator Guzman. It's nice to meet you virtually. We'll have to do this in person next time at some point when this pandemic is all over and hopefully behind us. Before I move on to the next segment of the program, I want to take a moment to remind all of you at home that we want to hear from you. Let us know what you thought about Administrator Guzman's remarks, and don't forget to share your thoughts, comments, and questions about this topic through this discussion on Twitter using the hashtag CHCIHHM2021 or by submitting comments and questions into the chat function. Thank you, Administrator Guzman. We want to now supplement that amazing discussion with some great expertise from people who are out in various parts of the country at various companies doing some very important work. Now, I want to start with introductions and getting to know some of these great people. First, please welcome our first panelist, Marissa Moret. She serves as the Director of Strategic Partnerships at Airbnb and Chief of Staff for the Global Policy and Communications team. She oversees the 200-plus person team who manages multidisciplinary media and policy campaigns. Marissa, welcome. Why don't you say a few words about how you're tied to the topic today?
Great. Good morning, everyone. Thank you to CHCI for hosting and to Omar. And of course, my fellow panelists, Christina and Chris, for sharing their insights today. I am Marissa Moret with Airbnb, and I want to thank CHCI for inviting me to participate on this panel. I am a proud alum of CHCI's high school internship program, so it's an absolute honor to be here. I would not be the Latina professional I am today without CHCI. So I spent most of my career as a lawyer and an advocate, both in private practice and public sector. And I joined Airbnb's 5 years ago, as you said, Omar, and I'm currently the Chief of Staff and Director of Strategic Partnerships on the Global Policy and Communications team. And Airbnb has long been a platform for economic empowerment for everyday people. And so I look forward to sharing more about our work during this discussion. Thank you.
We are glad to have you. Next, let's welcome Cristina Martin Fervira. She is AARP's Vice President of Financial Security and Livable Communities for Government Affairs. She oversees AARP's federal and state advocacy on Social Security, pensions, retirement savings, financial services, and other aspects of retirement financial security. Please welcome Cristina. Cristina, why don't you say a few words and how you're tied to the topic?
Sure. Thank you so much, Omar. If you haven't already received some mail from AARP, then let me tell you a little bit about ourselves. We're the nation's largest nonprofit, nonpartisan organization dedicated to empowering Americans who are 50 and older to choose how they want to live as they age. And we have 38 million members and offices in every state across America, as well as in the District of Columbia, the U.S. Virgin Islands, and mi isla, Puerto Rico. So many of our members are part of our community, and I could not be more delighted to be speaking today at CHCI to talk a little bit about what we're doing to empower folks, especially through this pandemic, which has placed such a financial strain on just about everyone.
Yeah, I think that's fair to say. We're glad to have you. Finally, we're joined by Chris Wheat, the co-president for the JP Morgan Chase Institute. Previously, Chris serves as the director of analytics at a financial technology startup where he led the development of advanced analytics algorithms. Chris, welcome. Why don't you say a few words about why you're excited to be here?
Thank you. And I am very excited to be here. I couldn't be more happy to be in this conversation. As you said, I'm one of the co-presidents of the JP Morgan Chase Institute. Our mission for the past several years at this point really has been to use the de-identified administrative data that we see across the JP Morgan Chase platform from our customers that gives us this amazing lens to understand what's happening in the US economy in particular. Our intent is to use that data really to engage with policymakers, decision makers, many of whom I think are reflected in the organization and certainly in the audience, to help them understand what's happening in the economy so they can make better decisions. We, for a long time, have always been committed to understanding how we can assist inclusive economic growth, and for the last few years have really leaned into what we could to try to understand racial differences in financial outcomes. And so this conversation is near and dear to my heart, both in my role here and in my prior work as an academic. And so I couldn't be more happy to be part of this conversation. So thank you.
Of course. Well, we're going to get started. Chris, I'll actually start with you because specifically with JP Morgan Chase, I think when you think about engagement, it's sort of trying to change that, not thinking of it as just a blanket investment, but more as entrepreneurship. And I think that's a critical shift at the center of all of this. At the center of all of it is money. So Chris, and what you do, you invest, but how can you take it further to, say, financial literacy in the Latino community so that you're building something for the long term, not just fixing a short-term problem?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I'm thrilled to talk about entrepreneurship. In some sense, the work that I've led for the Institute for most of the time that I've been here has been around small businesses. And that's been the research area that I've been closest to for the longest time. And it's really important, right? I think the investments that we make in entrepreneurs build our communities. I heard Administrator Guzman's comments and resonated with so many of them. And I think people haven't always paid attention to the ways that we have either invested or not invested in our entrepreneurship community, have either served the growth of the broader community or not. I think financial literacy is an interesting topic. It certainly is consistent with the research that we've done that have shown financial challenges and hurdles that a lot of small business owners, I think, have to face. Most people who start a small business start it because they love the product or the service that they're delivering, and not necessarily because they want to be an accountant or sort of an expert in finance. And so you can see in the data and in the behavior places where more knowledge about how to manage those finances effectively could be helpful. I think it would be unfair to only point at financial literacy as the thing that sort of determines the differences that we see in those outcomes, though. I think pointing at the larger sort of structural differences as well is equal portion. So can you as an entrepreneur do something to improve your financial literacy? Could we as an organization help you with that? 100% we could. It would really be important to do that. But I always feel like it's important to put that in the context of the bigger picture, the longer term, slower moving differences we see between, for instance, Latino entrepreneurs, white entrepreneurs, Black entrepreneurs, I think are very important for policymakers to pay attention to as well.
Yeah. And Christina, kind of along these lines of entrepreneurship, or to jump off of it, we know the pandemic has been especially hard on small businesses, but also on the unemployed. And you and I have spoken before about long-term unemployment. So tell me about some of the difficult dynamics at play there, and especially within the Latino community.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So we're at ARP, we're always concerned about age discrimination and the impact it has on the ability of older workers who tend to be, of course, much more experienced, have put in more years in the labor force, how it prevents them from staying employed, basically. And so to pick up where Chris left off, in the past, oftentimes an off-ramp from a job, because you're let go on account of age discrimination, has been to start your own business. And during pandemic, that's really not been an effective way to gain income for a lot of older workers. So we do see that among the long-term unemployed, there's an overrepresentation of older individuals. There's a growing problem in particular for women, and I think this is an issue that we see across all age groups. Women have separated from jobs either by choice or not Maybe they want to keep working, but they can't for a whole host of reasons. And a big one is because they have caregiving obligations. And so we see caregiving as one of the barriers, especially for older workers. And we see it a lot in the Hispanic Latina community, really preventing women from staying employed, especially because so many caregiving obligations have increased during this entire time period with COVID. And if I could just touch on one last thing, for our community, overwhelmingly family caregivers, of which there are 48 million in America. For Hispanics and Latinas, family caregivers tend to be younger. We're in our mid-40s, and we're not just caring for a parent or an in-law, we're also caring for our own children. We overwhelmingly tend to be typically married or have a partner and have young kids at home. So we're talking about women who are trying to make do without childcare. We're trying to figure out what to do when schools are meeting virtually. And we have someone at home who now is more likely than not to put their health at risk because of COVID if they're not taking extra care of themselves. And guess what? We're the ones taking extra care. That all has a huge financial impact. And it's something that we've got our eyes on and that we're doing a lot of advocacy around.
Yeah. And one of the key parts of that, of course, is communication. Marissa, this is your department here. You work within a lot of policy and communication partnerships through Airbnb. But how valuable is it simply to just have the right organizations involved? And what dynamics have you found within the Latino community to be especially consistent, challenging, or unique?
Yeah, great question. So what both Chris and Christina definitely resonates with me as well, and our platform, and key thing, you're right, is our partnerships, right? So for Airbnb, diversity and belonging is so fundamental to achieving our mission, which is creating a world where anyone can belong anywhere, right? So we've really been focused on ensuring our programs and our platform can reach diverse communities, right? It's economic empowerment. So particularly the Latino community, and particularly those impacted by COVID. So first and foremost, you actually need people from that community to help shape the conversation, help give feedback. So it's individuals within the company and organizations like, frankly, Christina's and Chris's, right? So that can guide us. First and foremost, our community is not monolithic by any stretch. So that's important, shaping our platform to make sure it's responsive and accessible to all communities, right? So in my current role, we partner with a number of people thinking through that home sharing, access to economic empowerment using our tool, right? So partnering with large organizations like CHCI or LULAC, but really tapping into some of the grassroots organizations that know those communities best. We recently launched an Airbnb entrepreneurship academy, and that is specifically to respond to that need to work closer, hands-on with communities. And this is an immersive host training program meant to empower diverse communities to benefit from home sharing and particularly the return of travel, right? In the US, we actually started in a rural community, like Administrator Guzman mentioned, communities that are hurt most, and we partner with communities, so our partners, and one of them in particular in North Carolina is the Eastern Band of Cherokee Indians. And we are now starting to launch outside and coming to communities, including those with high Latino populations. But without our partners, we could not do this work.
Yeah, I mean, collaboration across any industry is super important, but especially in the context that you've laid out. Chris, one of the things I was thinking about during your earlier answer tied to financial literacy is, look, for someone like me, English is my primary language, and I still don't know half of what I should be doing with my money. So how much of an issue, it's a two-part question, how much of an issue is the language barrier in boosting financial literacy at all? But then separately, to the second part of your earlier answer, is what are some of the most concerning disparities you're seeing between demographic groups in the work that you do?
Oh, those are both great questions. I'll try to take them in order. So the question around language, first, you're right. Like knowing what you need to know to be financially successful is hard, and people study for a long time. And I think like many people face this problem with the additional barriers sometimes of language. The other way I would think about the language question, and I would say it's a really good, I'm a researcher first and foremost, right? And I think it's a really interesting question that I don't know that we have a great answer to, is how much is language part of the constellation of elements that come into play when you're trying to build trust with your, in our case, customers, but anybody that you're sort of like engaging with around really important decisions, whether that's, trying to find the right loan product for your business, whether that's getting the right mortgage for your home. Those are like heavyweight decisions for a business owner or homeowner to make, and building the trust and understanding with the firm that you're doing business with is really important, right? And so it is hard for me to imagine translating while trying to build trust, right? Like, am I coming from the same place as you are? Do I think about things the same way that you do? I kind of have the same touch points. Is like the language in terms of the words on the page are part of that, but I think it's easier for me to understand that conceptually as part of a bigger package of just making sure that you're actually staying connected with that person you're sitting these days across the Zoom screen with, and the before times across the table with when you're making those important decisions. And I think it's likely really important. Have we done research on that? No, not yet. I would be very happy to come back to you in a couple of years and tell you a more grounded answer to the question of how much it makes a difference. In terms of the kinds of things that we see that are most concerning, I think and I alluded to this before, that the slower moving differences in wealth, they're just very hard to move around, right? Like there's been tremendous work, I think, sort of across many administrations, in particular the most recent one around programs that are sort of moving income around. And I think many people have commented, we certainly have, on the large impact of the ARP and other programs on income, right? And so we've seen some really interesting dynamics around how lower income families have really benefited quite a bit from some of these programs, but the wealth gaps are just much harder to move. And we've seen in our research, others have seen in their research, just these very large wealth gaps by race. Where Latino families are having like significantly lower wealth than white families. Like those are the things that we think about really hard about the more structural interventions that are likely needed to move that more heavyweight difference around. And so that's kind of what comes top of mind for me.
Yeah, and whether it's trust, whether it's disparities, these are all dynamics that are important. But one that's especially important is access. And Christina, for you, we know it's not just about the language barrier, but access in particular, the internet maybe has never been more important than it is right now, especially over the past year and a half. And so what are you seeing within the Latino community as some of the biggest obstacles in this quest for access, not just the internet, but just for access in general?
Sure. So COVID has been transformative in any number of arenas, and one of them for sure is this question of how much we rely on the internet to be able to access just very basic services, right? So to give an example, before March 2020, if you wanted to get your Social Security benefits when it was time to retire, or start your Medicare benefits to access your health care when you're 65, you would do that through the Social Security Administration. And you still do that through the Social Security Administration, except you can't go in person. So you have to do this on the phone or online. And that's an example that's mission critical for older people, but it's everything, right? It's access to telehealth, it's access to information that you need to stay healthy. It's isolation. It's being able to stay in touch with your family when you can't travel, right? When you can't take those trips. And what we have found during the last 18 months is, look, even in places that have high-speed internet, that have broadband, so that you can access all of that, it's not affordable for everyone, and it's particularly not affordable for certain communities. So we have been working really hard on that issue, because what we don't want is to come out of COVID and discover that what was previously a pretty bad digital divide has become a canyon, right? And that there are going to be millions of us left behind. And you can really look at who those communities are. They are our communities, they're rural communities, and these are populations that have a lot of other barriers to accessing the services that they need and deserve already. So that is something that we've been working on a lot. Again, we've done a lot of advocacy around that. We're really pleased that there is now a program called the Emergency Broadband Benefit. That was something that was enacted late last year. We lobbied hard to get that. And it has billions of dollars in subsidies, essentially. I mean, that's basically what it is, so that individuals who can't afford basically their internet connection can get these vouchers. And if you go to arp.org/EBB, you can see a lot of our materials, many of them in Spanish. We've been doing a lot of outreach into the Spanish language community. And we are really pleased to report that of the emergency broadband benefit that's been accessed already, over 40% of it has been taken up by people who are 50 and older, and a surprising number has been taken up by people who are 80 and older, which really makes me happy to hear, right? Because the internet and everything that it has to offer is for people of all ages.
Yeah. And one of the persistent topics that I think applies to all of you all, and I'll open it up to all of you on this, is this idea of, we have been through the past year and a half, something that has affected every single aspect of life, from personal health to obviously the economic side of things and people's livelihoods at the end of the day. The ability for people to put food on the table for their families. So you all work in the business world, and businesses affected by the pandemic are extensions of the people affected by it. As we look to one day, hopefully get out of this and put it behind us once and for all, how do we make sure an economic recovery is equitable and that we come back stronger than ever. Marissa, I'll start with you to open up that discussion.
Yeah, so that's a great question, tough question, right?
Great question.
I certainly don't have the answer, but I could tell you some of the things we're doing. We're a home sharing, and we're really actually built on economic empowerment. I have to share the story of how we started so you fully appreciate what's in our DNA. So we were founded in 2008 during the Great Recession, and our founders, two guys, couldn't pay their rent. And so they created this website. Conference was coming to San Francisco, and they blew up air mattresses. That's why our name's Airbnb. And they made enough money to pay their rent. And they said, we have this idea. Of course, everyone said, what stranger is going to go stay at somebody's home? But since the pandemic has begun, we have new hosts who have joined, and they've earned $6 billion in supplemental income. 55% of our hosts are women. 1 in 5 hosts who are employed are either teachers or healthcare workers, right? And so we really want to bring awareness to the benefits of home sharing. Work, again, like the Entrepreneurship Academy that I mentioned earlier, broadband essential to that. So I agree with Christina 100%. But we are also really working creatively with cities to be part of the solution, right? To keep tenants in their home in the aftermath of COVID. So we announced in June, before the end of the moratoriums, that we were going to come up with a policy and work with cities to prevent landlords who might use our marketplace and our platform to profit from those tenants that they've evicted. So we've partnered with cities. We want to send a strong message that we will help cities, and if they give us the documentation, we will make sure that those landlords can't profit, and we would remove them from our platform. So we're confident that sort of innovations like this that tech can bring to be working with cities and communities to make sure that recoveries are equitable.
Christina, Chris, you have any thoughts?
Yeah, I'd like to jump in and just come back to caregiving across all ages, and for our older family members, our nuestras abuelas, nuestras madres, but also our children. If we cannot address the issue of caregiving, the care economy, the role that childcare plays in the economy, the need to support family caregivers through things like the credit for caring, a tax credit that we support, because everyone has different expenses out of pocket. On average, 26% of a caregiver's income goes to support that unpaid work. And so if we cannot find ways to address all of these issues now, women are never going to be able to fully participate in the economy. So that's going to be a gender divide that needs to be addressed. And in particular, the women in our communities, right? Hispanic women, Black women, they are disproportionately affected by these issues for a whole host of reasons. And if we are not pursuing the policies that are really required to let women, no one wants to give up their roles as mothers, daughters, sisters, aunties. We want to do those things. We love our families and the people we care for, but that should not be a barrier to having financial security, to having employment, and to having a good economic future. So we've got a great moment right now. We could get paid leave done. We could get a lot of these policies done, and that will make a huge difference going forward in addressing these disparities in the economy.
Yeah. Chris?
Yeah, if I really follow up on Christina's points. I think of all of the points you just made around women, workforce attachment, caregiving, the intersectionality of race and gender. That is like very salient there to me. As an illustration of and I think you use these words, so I'm just going to like try to lift them back up. An acknowledgement in the current moment of what is possible from both the public and private sector, right? So that's certainly how I think about a lot of the public sector activity that we've seen over the last several months. Is like there's a new imagination. I shouldn't call it. There's a current imagination about sort of what is possible that I don't think was true, not that long ago. And you see policymakers, private sector entities, JP Morgan Chase, right, has made large commitments and following up on them, right, in terms of racial gaps, racial equity. And it's not just JP Morgan Chase, although I'm very proud of the commitments that we've made, right, like across the public sector and the private sector. You just see a lot of activity that hadn't happened before as people have been going through it. Been a traumatic, change. And so I think you framed the question, Omar, it's like, well, what can be done to sort of move and sort of take advantage of, if you want to think about it that way, the moment. I think finding ways to remember, right? To not go back to a situation where we don't see that kind of ability to implement these kind of programs, to forget like why it was and what it was that we saw with with families at home trying to find childcare, with low-income workers kind of thinking about the working conditions that they're facing and like what works for them and what doesn't. Right now, I think it is clear to see that. I'm very hopeful that we are going to find ways to institutionalize some of what we learned so that it doesn't dissipate before we are able to make more substantive changes.
Yeah, no, I mean, these are all discussions that are happening at every level of the government, private sector, and more, to try and figure out how we can do this in the best way possible. Now, throughout all of your answers, people have been sending in questions, and I now have those questions. So I'm gonna ask some of you all what the viewers have been thinking about as we've been talking. Now, one dynamic that I think we haven't hit on that is important within the Latino community is the undocumented Latino community, and how some of the discussions that we've had translate to that world. So I'll pose the question to you, Christina, but obviously anyone can chime in, is what actions are being taken, what actions can be taken to protect undocumented Latino workers as we look to this economic recovery?
Well, that's a very complex question, as we all know, made more complex by the political environment we're facing in Congress. And the reality is, while a lot obviously could and should be done, I don't know that there is a good answer today, just given what we are seeing unfold in real time, even just this week, right? So I hate to give that kind of an answer. I don't want to sound in any way defeated, but I think it's to Chris's point, the current imagination includes so much that hasn't been on the table previously, but whether the political realities will allow for that moment to fully be realized, I don't know. I don't know the answer to that. I'm just being honest.
Yeah. No, and that answer is something I've heard from so many people, where even going out in some of these communities and reporting in Latino communities during the pandemic around the vaccination efforts, one of the toughest dynamics seemed to be able to ensure some level of trust between those that were undocumented in the community and these clinics where the vaccinations were happening, because they did not trust that they would not be targeted unfairly after giving someone their information. And so I think it's a dynamic that is going to be at play for a while. There are no perfect solutions out there. But I want to get to another one of the questions that people are submitting. The economic recovery has gone better than expected compared to the 2008 financial crisis. What lessons can be learned from then and now and be used in future recovery efforts? Marissa, I'll pose that question to you, since the Airbnb origin story was around then. I know you weren't there at the time, obviously, blowing up air mattresses, but are there lessons that you all have looked to in the years after 2008 and tried to apply to what we're going through now and potentially future crises?
Yeah, I was not there in 2008, but um, I think for us, we are very much a community-driven company, right? That aspires to be sort of a 21st century company that benefits all stakeholders in the long term. And so as we're thinking back in 2008, as we've been through this and we're still in this pandemic, we are really relying on the people who make our company successful. So our hosts, right, who open up their homes, the guests who stay in those homes, our employees, and the communities in which we serve. And that means the engagement, the community engagement of talking and learning, adapting, innovating. Some of the things we've learned sort of through the years and how we adapt. One of the things I'm really proud about is our disaster response and our response to house Afghan refugees, right? The disaster response where people can open their homes for free, and we work with Red Cross and other disaster recovery companies and organizations to allow people to stay free on the Airbnb platform, right? That came out from a host. It was a host's idea. And so we very much listen to our community to adapt and innovate. The Entrepreneurship Academy, we're going to continue, we're just launching in the US. It actually started in townships in South Africa. So we'll continue to work and adapt and work closely with those communities. But we're learning a lot during this pandemic.
Oh, of course, as everyone has, for better or for worse. Chris, I want to pose that question to you with a slight addition, with a similar question that came up. Was, yes, are there lessons that were learned after 2008 that can be applied to future crises? But the wrinkle to that question is, you mentioned the impact on wealth and income and the disparities. How can people personally prepare for the next potential economic crisis and still have a decent quality of life?
The second question is a great one. So I'm going to use my time to try to think of
quality of life. We're all just looking for decent quality of life.
Well, on the first question, or the first part of the question anyway, it's super hard to compare historical events, and so I want to be very careful about sort of saying like these are two instances of the same thing, because there's in so many ways they're not, right? Like the shape of the crises are quite different. In a variety of ways. I won't even be able to sort of really list it all. One thing that I think has been observed in our research and in other places as well is just that the magnitude of the fiscal response was just a lot larger. The magnitude of the fiscal response with respect to programs targeting income supports directly to families was larger in that sense, right? And so this is kind of what I was alluding to in terms of like what we imagined was possible and what try to do. And I don't know that it was obvious that you could push that much money at families and that they would spend it and kind of like see that kind of spending response. But insofar as we could tell from research, they were able to do so. And that may have been really important in kind of getting things turned around. But I don't want to like overstate the similarities and say that had we done the same kind of thing, in the global financial crisis, that the same thing would have happened. Because I'm not sure we're sure that's true. Your question about
it was a viewer question, kind of tied to the impact on wealth and income specifically, and then how can people prepare for the next inevitable crisis?
Again, it's a really good question, and it presupposes that the things that you would do to prepare are the things that you would do to build the buffers of families so that they were better situated. Are largely on the families who do so. And in some sense, it kind of comes back to the conversation we're having about financial health. Yes, to the extent that you are able to have differential savings behaviors that can build more of a financial buffer, we see again and again that families respond to all kinds of crises, be it job loss or a pandemic, or maybe job loss because of a pandemic. Those that have bigger financial buffers are better able to respond to them. So if you can do it, you can, but like, what are the things that you do? Like on the margin, if you save a little more here, like, yeah, that's great. But a lot of those things that you would do to have that wealth are like, if you could happen to be born to a person who has household wealth to transfer to you, it's hard to sort of make that the policy recommendation. So again, I feel guarded in structuring the answer to that question in a way that presupposes that it's mostly individual behavior that's causing those differences to begin with.
course. And our next viewer question is, I'm going to pose to Christina because it specifically says, what does the ARP do to help its members get their small businesses on track? And the wrinkle to that question, as it combines some viewer questions here, is what are some recommendations you would have for short-term solutions to support the recovery of immigrant workers? So the first one's tailored to you. The second one I'll end up opening to everyone else.
Sure. No, I appreciate that. So, again, I really want to underscore, we're well aware that, in general, starting a business during pandemic was, I don't have a better way to say it, just wasn't a good idea. We know we all know many small business owners in our own neighborhoods and communities that have struggled to stay afloat during pandemic, even with government supports. Before we had COVID, at ARP, we have had, a whole suite of resources that we used to offer through our programming, which is what we do when we meet with our members face to face. So this is through webinars, through teletown halls, and through in-person events. And we would do a whole host of things to help folks find the tools that they needed. And I know Chris was talking a little bit about it in terms of just how do you get your financials in order? Where do you learn how to put together a business plan if that's not something that you already know how to do? And so we did used to offer a lot of that. And I think that we're all looking forward to doing that kind of programming again, so that when we're doing in-person events and when we are in the community, we're not just saying to folks, hey, do you want to come on down and we'll do a resume workshop, which is something that we also do, but also, hey, do you want to come on down and we'll help you think about how to launch a small business. I think we're really sensitive to the reality that the last 18 months have been brutal for small business, and we just need to be honest with ourselves about that. And just like Chris was talking about, a big difference between now and the 2008, 2009 crisis has been the kind of fiscal support, the kind of just government money sort of out there helping folks out, whether it be through, economic impact payments or through a lot of the small business money that went out the door through the Treasury Department. Yes, those are all policies that have been supported, and during this crisis, I mean, I think the bottom line is we've all had to admit that it's going to take more than just, true grit is not enough. It's going to take a lot more than that.
Yeah. And I want to end on this question. It's a viewer question, but I think it's pertinent. Especially with an infrastructure bill that's still up in the air. We'll see if we have a vote on the House side on Monday. But specifically about the relationship between the private and public sector in trying to ensure an equitable economic recovery. And it's going to take that partnership. And so the question is, how can the private and public sector work together to have a quicker and obviously better recovery? Since that involves communication, I'll throw it to Marissa.
Yeah, I mean, I think, what Chris said, like the imagination and the innovation is going to be key, right? I do think we're at a place where corporate responsibility is at an all-time sort of with a lens on it. I think our employees demand it, our customers demand it, and I think it's important for us to show up and meet the moment, all of corporate America, because that's what it's going to take. It's not just government doing it. It is truly private public, partnerships and creativity and innovation. So yeah, I'm excited about the future. I think companies like Airbnb, companies like Chase, JP Morgan, even, AARP, it's going to take, they say it's going to take a village, but it really is. And I think so that we don't forget this moment, right? That we actually do things creative and innovative. That's I think what it's going to take.
Yeah. I want to,
frankly.
Well, yeah, of course. I want to give this opportunity. We got a few minutes left here, And thank you all. You've been so generous with your time. Just to give a few closing remarks, anything that's weighing on your mind about this topic that you think we either didn't hit or you think people should be thinking about as they log off of this session and go into the next session. So Christina, I'll start with you.
We're just really grateful for the opportunity to once again be able to speak at CHCI. This is such an important conference to shape policy and thinking, and we really are at a crossroads. I think Chris pointed this out. This is a very special moment. We could really transform a lot of situations. Certainly, COVID has transformed us, whether we wanted that or not. Now it's policymakers have an opportunity to also seize the moment and transform a lot of these issues that impact our communities very deeply. So that's really what I want everyone to be thinking about as they go through this conference and they think about the power that you all have to influence that conversation.
Chris, what's on your mind?
I was listening to Marissa's answer to the other question, to the last question, with a lot of interest, and I resonate with so much what you said. Our organization, the JP Morgan Chase Institute, anyway, not JP Morgan Chase as a whole, we exist because of the idea of a public-private partnership, and so it's literally in our DNA. Like the theory of the case was that the private sector has information, both in our data, but also, quite frankly, in our understanding of sort of the products and the industry, that could be useful to help policymakers make decisions. And so, like, what we do is we take data and we try to transform it into insights that we think are helpful for public sector and other private sector decision makers. Again, as I think I said at the top, many of I believe in this audience and certainly exist all around CHCI. So that is it's the thing that I really think the opportunity is. It's certainly an opportunity for us. I certainly want to make sure that people understand that is what we do, that we do this research, we release it for the public because we want to have that engagement. I certainly invite anybody who doesn't know that to get to know more, get to learn more about us, find ways to engage with us so we can make sure that we're addressing in general the questions that are of interest. And then, yes, especially now, right? We have certainly found new and more important ways to engage with all of the things that have been changing, both in terms of the economics that families and small businesses and markets, quite frankly, are experiencing, but also the new kinds of questions that are, well, not new questions, the old questions that are finding their way back into the politics and policy discourse. And so we couldn't be more enthusiastic about engaging with public sector, other private sector entities around these questions. It's what we do. It's what we get up in the morning and go to sleep thinking about. So again, really a thanks for the invitation to participate in this conversation.
Yeah. Marissa?
Yeah, I echo what both Christina and Chris said, but I'm going to go back to how I started as an intern here at CHCI. So it's been such a pleasure, and for me to watch this organization become the powerhouse that it is. I mean, I was talking to one of the employees yesterday when I worked there, because after I was an intern, I worked there while I was at college at Georgetown. There were 6 of us. There was not a conference like this that we could bring to our entire community. There weren't a lot of faces like us in corporate America. There certainly weren't the numbers in Congress that there are today. So I'm incredibly hopeful about the impact we can all have on our community. We're resilient, we're entrepreneurial, and it's going to be tough, but we're going to get through this with the support of one another. And so I'm leaving here inspired and looking forward to a brighter future. So thank you.
Yeah. Marissa, you read my mind, because I always like to end policy discussions, things like this, with brief notes of inspiration. So I'll ask you to engage in this exercise with me as we close out in these last few minutes. Is outside of policy, outside of the numbers and what you do in your everyday job, what motivates you to get out of the bed every morning and do the work that you do? Chris, I'll start with you. Big question.
I have 2 daughters, right? I looked at them; they're 1 and 6. When I'll keep it very real. I'm sitting here looking at a Zoom screen, and part of when I think about like what am I engaging with? I sort of have in the back of my mind the smile comes because I'm thinking about them, right? And I think about, their future and sort of like, what is it going to look like? And so when I say, have a deep and long-standing engagement in what does an equitable economy look like? Of course, it's because, like, in some sense, I think that's an important policy goal, but it's also like a super personal goal. I think, for all of us on this panel, it is quite frankly self-evidently a concern of interest. But it is both sort of like tactically, literally what gets me up in the morning. But it's also, I think, in the spirit that you asked the question, like what gets me up in the morning, because there is a world that is going to come after the things that we do. And I think we want to make it a better world. And again, I'm going to lift up something Marissa said earlier that I thought was really a great phrase. And I'm going to try to borrow it, and I'll try to cite it appropriately, about sort of like making everywhere sort of welcoming to everyone. I'm sure I mangled the words here, but that sentiment, I think, especially when you sort of really sort of drive down what that might entirely mean, is the kind of thing that really sort of motivates me personally. And I think is the kind of thing that gives you the energy to try to make the difficult changes in our political infrastructure that we would need to make to get that to happen.
Yeah. Christina?
Yeah, I think we're probably going to give pretty similar answers, right? When I get up and I'm thinking about what I'm going to do at work today, I really have a pretty simple litmus test, which is, would this make my mom's life easier or not? And that, I mean, like, I don't overthink it, right? What inspires me to pursue the work is a 76-year-old immigrant woman who has limited retirement savings going to benefit and have a happier day or not? And that can mean a lot of things, by the way. So there's a lot to do. There's a lot to do. Because generations love to think about younger generations too, right?
Yeah, it's true. Marissa, bring us home.
Yeah,
No pressure.
it's hard to add anything new to that, but agree 100%. I think about my nieces and nephews, and frankly, when I show up to work every day, I mean, I do work with our Airbnb community, and I hear from our hosts and how much, the supplemental income means to them. And so that's very motivating, knowing that I'm working at a company that actually does make a difference in people's lives each and every day. It's not tons of money. I think the average host is $9,600, so less than $10,000, but that's significant. But collectively, it's billions of dollars, billions around the world. And so that's what motivates me to stay, with the company. But like, bigger picture, absolutely my friends and my family and, the next generations to come.
Yeah. Well, part of what motivates me is getting to talk to people like you, smart people who are doing great work out in the community. And honestly, thank you all for being a part of this discussion. I think for me in particular, one of the reasons I wanted to be involved with this was throughout the pandemic and the work that I do, we're trying to look at how it affects different communities differently. And unfortunately, we've seen major disparities in an already unfortunate situation. And especially within the Latino community, they were affected much more significantly in many ways than other demographics. And trying to get to the bottom of why that is happening and what barriers were in place that created this outcome, I think is something that is important, should be looked at, not just in the Latino community, but in so many different demographics and groups across this country. And I'm just glad that we were able to enrich our audience, hopefully, with this discussion we had as part of it. So this would be the part where everyone would give you a round of applause, but you're just going to have to imagine it. I want to thank our great panelists for this discussion: Marissa Moret, Christina Martin Fervita, and Chris Weed. Thank you all. Quick round of applause for you all right there. There you go. That's all you're going to get from this. It's only validation here. For all of you at home, please keep tweeting about the Congressional Hispanic Caucus Institute Leadership Conference during this Hispanic Heritage Month at CHCI HHM21. We've got great sessions planned for the conference, and we encourage you to attend them throughout the day. If you know people who would be interested in the conference but haven't signed up yet, you can encourage them to log in and register at chci.org. And finally, so we're going to have a lot of serious talk throughout the day. Let's have some fun. Join us for Disney's Encanto, a behind-the-scenes preview today at 5 o'clock Eastern Time. Saw the trailer. Looks great. You're going to love it. But for now, I'm Omar Jimenez, a correspondent with CNN. This has been an amazing discussion, and have a great day. Please enjoy the conference.